It was one of those calm afternoons when everything felt ordinary. The sun was dropping behind the tall houses, and the sound of kids playing in the park mixed with the distant hum of cars. A 17-year-old boy walked down the sidewalk with his backpack hanging loose over one shoulder. He had just finished basketball practice at school and was heading home, his earphones tucked in, music filling his mind as he kicked a small stone ahead of him. He wasn't in a rush. He loved this time of day, that quiet hour before dinner when the air felt cool and the streets looked golden. His thoughts drifted between his game performance and the test he had to study for that night. Everything was calm, just a normal walk home like any other. As he turned down his street, a police car rolled slowly up the road behind him. At first, he didn't think much of it. Police cars passed by all the time, but this one didn't pass. It slowed down, then crept beside him. He felt the weight of its presence before he even looked. The low sound of the engine made the moment heavy. He glanced sideways and saw two officers inside. The one in the driver's seat was staring directly at him, and the other was talking into the radio. The boy felt a strange tension building in his chest. He turned his music down but kept walking, pretending not to notice. Then he heard a voice behind him. "Hey, you there. Stop for a second." He turned slowly, unsure if they were talking to him. The car stopped beside the sidewalk and the driver's door opened. The officer stepped out, his hand resting on his belt. "Where you coming from, son?" the officer asked, his tone more command than question. "From school," the boy replied politely, taking out one earbud. "Just had basketball practice." The officer looked him up and down. "You live around here?" "Yes, just 2 blocks away," he said, pointing toward his street. The second officer came around the front of the car now. "You match the description of someone we're looking for," he said, squinting his eyes. The boy frowned slightly. "Someone you're looking for?" "Yeah," the first officer added. "A young male, dark hoodie, dark pants, carrying a bag. You fit that description." The boy glanced down at his clothes and then back up. "A lot of people wear hoodies after practice," he said quietly. The second officer's eyes narrowed. "You being smart, kid?" "No, sir. I'm just saying." He stopped himself, realizing his words might make things worse. He had heard stories from his mom about moments like this, how a single wrong tone could turn a misunderstanding into something bigger. The officer stepped closer. "Let's see some ID." He reached into his pocket slowly, making sure his movements were calm and clear. "It's in my wallet." "Keep your hands where I can see them," the first officer barked. He froze. His hand stopped halfway. His heart started beating faster. "It's just my school ID," he said softly. The officer nodded. "Go ahead, slow." The boy pulled the small plastic card out and handed it over. The officer stared at it for a few seconds, then back at him. "This address still current?" "Yes, sir. That's my house." The officer didn't hand it back right away. "You got anything in that bag?" "Just clothes and shoes from practice," he replied. "Mind if we take a look?" He hesitated, unsure what to say. His mother always told him to stay respectful, but also to know his rights. I don't think I did anything wrong," he said carefully. The officer's tone hardened. "I asked if you mind if we take a look." He swallowed. "You can check it, sir." He set the bag down on the hood of the patrol car. The second officer unzipped it and pulled out a basketball, a jersey, a towel, and a pair of sneakers. "Looks clean," he muttered, but the tension didn't fade. The first officer kept watching him as if expecting something more. Cars drove by slowly. People started glancing from their porches. The boy felt all those eyes on him. The second officer leaned against the car and whispered something to his partner. The first one nodded. Then he said, "We've had reports of some break-ins nearby. You sure you weren't around the convenience store earlier?" "I just came from school," he repeated, his voice trembling a little now. You can even call the coach, but they didn't call anyone. They just kept circling him with their questions. The longer it went, the more the boy's chest tightened. He could feel his knees shaking slightly. Then the second officer said, "Turn around, hands behind your back." The boy blinked in disbelief. "For what?" "Just do it," the officer said sharply. "I didn't do anything," he said, panic creeping into his voice. "Don't argue," the first one snapped, stepping closer. He lifted his hand slowly, but before he could say more, someone from across the street yelled out, "Hey, he's just a kid. That's the neighbor's boy." The officers looked up but didn't move away. One of them shouted back, "Stay out of it, ma'am." The boy's heart was pounding now. He didn't know whether to move or stay still. He kept thinking of his mother, how she always said if anything ever happened, he should stay calm, not run, not fight, just breathe. But it was hard to breathe when two strangers looked at you like a criminal. The officer behind him said again, "Hands behind your back," he whispered, "please. I didn't do anything." Just as the officer reached for his cuffs, a dark SUV slowed to a stop a few feet away. The engine stayed running, the windows tinted. For a second, no one paid attention to it. Then the driver's door opened. A woman stepped out, moving fast but steady. She wore jeans, a jacket, and sunglasses that hid her eyes. She didn't say anything at first. She just watched the scene quietly, studying every move, every word. The boy didn't see her yet. His head was down, his voice breaking as he tried to explain again that he hadn't done anything wrong. The woman took a few steps closer, pulling out a small wallet from her pocket. She flipped it open, revealing something shiny inside. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Officers," she said firmly, "what exactly is going on here?" The two men turned toward her. The tone in her voice made them pause. "Ma'am, please step back," one said, but she didn't. She closed the distance between them, calm but serious. "That boy," she said, pointing toward her son. "What are you detaining him for?" The first officer frowned.
"Do you know him, ma'am?"
Her lips tightened. "Yes," she said slowly. "I know him very well." The other officer said, "We're conducting an investigation. He matches a suspect description." The woman nodded once, her expression unreadable. "And did you confirm that before you started harassing a minor?" The word harassing caught them off guard. The first officer straightened up. "Ma'am, you need to stay clear. This is a police matter." She took another step closer and opened her wallet wider, flashing a badge. Not a local one, but federal. The light caught the edges of it just enough for the lettering to be clear. The officers froze for a moment. One of them blinked, then glanced at his partner. "Wait, are you—" "Yes," she said sharply, cutting him off. "And that's my son." The boy looked up, his eyes wide. "Mom?" he whispered. The officer's entire posture shifted. Their confidence melted into discomfort. The woman's calm expression didn't change, but there was fire behind her voice when she said, "Lower your hands, sweetheart. You're fine now." He obeyed slowly, his shoulders trembling as relief started to hit him. The officer stuttered through half-formed apologies, suddenly unsure of what to say. The woman held their gaze, her tone low but firm. "You just pointed a weapon at a child walking home from school," she said. "You need to explain that." Neither of them could. They muttered about procedure and matching a description, but the damage was already done. The small crowd nearby had grown. A few people were recording on their phones now. The woman turned briefly toward them, then back to the officers. "You're done here," she said. "We'll handle this." The officers exchanged nervous looks. The first one mumbled, "Ma'am, we didn't mean—" "Save it," she said coldly. "You can explain it in your report." She turned toward her son and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Get your bag," she said gently. "Let's go home." He nodded, picking it up with shaky hands. The two of them walked back toward the SUV in silence. The crowd slowly dispersed, murmuring among themselves. The police car stayed parked for a long time after they drove away, the two officers staring at each other, pale and quiet. Inside the SUV, the boy finally spoke.
"How did you get here?"
She sighed, her voice softer now. "I was on my way back from work and saw the lights. I didn't even realize it was you until I stopped." He looked out the window, still shaken. They didn't even listen. "They just—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "I know," she said, her hand squeezing his gently. "You did everything right." As the car rolled down the quiet street, the sun finally dipped below the houses. The ordinary afternoon that had started with music and laughter had turned into something he'd never forget. A moment that showed how quickly calm could turn into chaos, and how one person's presence could change everything. That night, the house was quiet, but no one really felt calm. The boy sat at the kitchen table, still wearing his practice clothes, staring down at the same glass of water he hadn't touched in almost an hour. His mother moved around the kitchen slowly, setting her bag down, taking a deep breath every few minutes like she was trying to hold something inside. The air between them was heavy. The kind of silence that has too many thoughts hiding inside it. Finally, she sat across from him and said softly, "You okay?" He didn't look up right away. "I think so," he said, but his voice sounded tired. She nodded, watching his hands fidget with the edge of his sleeve. You sure? He shrugged. It's just, I didn't do anything. I was just walking home. I know, she said. He looked at her finally, his eyes red from holding back tears. Why did they think I did something bad? She exhaled slowly. Sometimes people see what they want to see, not what's really there. He stayed quiet. She could see how shaken he still was, the way his shoulders hunched like he was still waiting for someone to yell at him. She wanted to tell him everything would be fine, but deep down, she knew this moment would stay with him for a long time. After a while, she reached across the table and put her hand on his. You handled yourself well, she said gently. You stayed calm and you didn't lose your temper. I was scared, he whispered, I know. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The ticking clock on the wall was the only sound. Then the boy asked something that hit her heart in a way she wasn't ready for. Would they still have stopped me if I didn't look like me? She blinked, her throat tightening. There were so many ways to answer that question, but none of them would make the truth easier to hear. I don't know, she said finally, her voice low. But I do know this. What happened today wasn't your fault. And you didn't deserve it, he nodded slightly. But the look in his eyes showed he was still replaying everything. The shouting, the fear, the way everyone stared. His mother stood up and poured him a warm cup of tea. Drink this, she said softly. It'll help you relax. He sipped slowly, the warmth calming him a little. Do they know who you are? He asked suddenly. She gave a small, tired smile. They do now, he looked confused. Did you tell their boss or something? Something like that, she said, sitting back down. I made a call after we got home. They'll have to explain what happened. He watched her for a long time. You weren't mad out there, he said. You looked calm. But your eyes, they looked like you wanted to yell. She chuckled softly. That's the trick. You learn to keep your fire quiet until the right moment. Did you ever get treated like that? He asked, curious now. Her eyes softened. Plenty of times, even when I wore the badge. Sometimes people see the uniform before they see the person. Other times they don't see either. They just see what they expect to see. He nodded slowly. That's messed up. It is, she agreed. But it's the world we live in. That's why I do what I do, to make sure it gets better for people like you. He smiled a little, proud but still shaken. You really scared them, though, she smirked. That wasn't my goal. I just needed them to stop before something went wrong. The boy thought about it, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup. If you hadn't shown up... He didn't finish. She reached out and squeezed his hand gently. But I did. That's what matters. Outside, a car drove by slowly, and both of them turned toward the window without meaning to. The world outside looked the same as always, quiet, safe, ordinary. But it didn't feel that way anymore. Later that night, after he went to bed, she sat alone in the living room with her laptop open. Her badge and gun sat on the table beside her, symbols of a system she both believed in and doubted at the same time. She started typing her report, every detail of what happened. Time, location, names, words said. She kept her tone factual, but her hands trembled on the keyboard. When she was done, she leaned back and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in a long time, she felt small, like her job, her title, her authority. None of it mattered in that moment when her son was just another face under suspicion. The next morning, the sun came through the blinds, bright and unbothered by the night before. The smell of breakfast filled the kitchen. She tried to make the morning feel normal, even if the memories still hung between them. He came down quietly, his backpack over his shoulder. Ready for school? She asked. He nodded. Yeah, want me to drop you off? He shook his head. I'll walk. It's fine. She hesitated, remembering that walk. You sure? He smiled faintly. I'll be okay, Mom. She let him go but watched from the window until he turned the corner. When he got to school, everyone seemed normal. But news spreads fast in small neighborhoods. A few classmates asked if the rumors were true, that the cops stopped him, that someone filmed it. He just shrugged and tried to change the subject. He didn't want to be a story. He just wanted to be himself again. At lunch, one of his friends sat beside him and said quietly, Man, my dad saw that video. He said it's already online. The boy looked up sharply. What video? The one that lady across the street took. It's all over social media now. People are saying your mom's a hero or something. His heart dropped. What? He pulled out his phone and searched. There it was, a short clip, barely a minute long, but it showed everything. The flashing lights, the officers yelling, and then his mother walking up calm and fearless. The title read, "Cops Stop Teen, Freeze When His Mom Flashes a Badge." He felt exposed, like the whole world was suddenly watching a part of his life that he didn't choose to share. Some comments were supportive, others judgmental. People debated who was right, who was wrong. To strangers, it was just another viral moment. But to him, it was personal. That night, he told his mom about the video. She already knew. "They asked me for a statement today," she said. "The department saw it too. Are you in trouble?" he asked quickly. She smiled. "No, if anything, they're embarrassed. The officer's supervisor called me earlier. He wants to meet." He looked uncertain. "You're going to see them again?" "Yes," she said. "I have to. It's not just about what they did to you. It's about what they could do to the next person." He didn't say anything, but his eyes followed her closely. That night, she sat in her car outside the precinct for a few minutes before going in. The same officers were there, looking uncomfortable in the conference room. Their supervisor apologized, saying it was a misunderstanding. She listened quietly, her face unreadable. When it was her turn to speak, she said only one thing. "If I hadn't been there, what would have happened to my son?" No one answered. The silence that followed said everything. After the meeting, she stepped outside and stood in the parking lot for a long time. The air was cool, the sky clear. She thought about her son walking home again. How vulnerable that simple act had become. She promised herself that she would never let this go unnoticed. When she returned home, he was waiting on the couch, half asleep. "How did it go?" he asked quietly. She smiled faintly. "It went. That's all that matters for now." He nodded. "People at school keep asking me about it. They say your video made them think." "Good," she said softly. "That's what I wanted." He leaned back, closing his eyes. "I still feel weird when I see a police car." She looked at him for a long moment. "That's normal," she said. "But don't let fear change who you are. You're not the one who should feel guilty." He nodded, trying to believe that. She turned off the light, leaving just the soft glow of the lamp beside him. "Get some rest," she said gently. As she walked down the hallway, she heard him whisper quietly to himself, "Thanks, Mom." She paused for a second, smiling to herself, and whispered back, "Always." That night, as the house finally grew quiet, she sat at her desk and opened a new document. Not an official report this time. Just her own notes, a letter she might never send. She wrote about fear, love, and what it means to be seen not as an officer, not as a woman, but as a mother. And at the very end, she wrote one line she wanted her son to believe forever. "You are not what they see. You are what you know you are." The morning after the meeting at the police station, the boy woke up feeling strange. He had slept, but not deeply. The events of the past 2 days replayed in his mind like a movie he didn't ask to watch. Every sound outside made him glance toward the window. The rumble of a car engine, the footsteps on the sidewalk, the faint hum of sirens in the distance. At the breakfast table, his mother was already dressed for work. She had a calm look on her face, but he could tell she hadn't slept much either. Her coffee mug sat beside a pile of papers she had printed out. "You're up early," she said softly. "Couldn't really sleep," he replied. She nodded, her eyes on the papers. "I know the feeling." He poured himself some cereal and sat down. "What are those?" he asked, pointing at the papers. "Statements," she said. "Reports, messages, some notes from my office. There's a lot of talk about what happened." He frowned. "Are you in trouble for stepping in?" She gave a small smile. "No, but people are paying attention now. The story's all over the news. Some are calling it an example of justice. Others, not so much," he sighed. "I just wish it didn't happen at all." She reached across the table and touched his hand gently. "I know, but sometimes the things we wish didn't happen are the ones that open people's eyes." He looked down. "I didn't want to be a lesson for anyone." "I know," she said softly. "But you didn't choose it. It chose you. What matters is what we do now." Later that day, she dropped him off at school. Reporters were still hovering around the entrance, trying to get a glimpse of him. He kept his head down as he walked in. Some classmates waved, others whispered. A few looked at him with a mix of admiration and curiosity. At lunch, his coach pulled him aside. "You holding up okay, kid?" he asked gently. "Trying to," he said. The coach nodded. You did nothing wrong. You remember that? He appreciated those words, even though they didn't take away the memory of how scared he'd been. Meanwhile, his mother was having a very different kind of day. Her office was filled with calls, meetings, and questions. She was used to managing chaos. She'd done it her whole career. But this was personal. She had to stay calm to make sure her emotions didn't cloud her focus. In one meeting, her supervisor said, "You understand the situation's sensitive, right? You were involved in a local police matter that's now under review." "I understand," she replied. "Good. The department wants to handle this carefully. It's not just about what happened. It's about how it looks. A federal agent stepping in during an active local investigation. It raises questions." She leaned forward slightly. "I wasn't stepping into an investigation. I was protecting a child from being treated unfairly. A child who happened to be my son." Her supervisor nodded slowly. "We're not questioning your actions. But the public doesn't always see the whole story." She folded her hands together, her voice calm but steady. "Then maybe it's time they do." When she got home that evening, the boy was sitting on the porch steps, a basketball resting beside him. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft orange and pink shades. "You okay?" she asked, sitting beside him. He shrugged. "They keep talking about it online." "Everyone's got an opinion," she smiled gently. "That's how the internet works. People talk more than they listen." "Yeah," he said. "But it's weird seeing strangers talk about your life like they know everything." She looked out at the street. "They don't know everything. They just know one part, the part someone recorded." "Still," he said quietly, "it feels like I can't escape it." "You don't have to," she said. "You just have to move through it. Let the noise pass. Focus on what's real." He turned to her. "And what's real?" She smiled softly. "Us." That night they ate dinner together in silence. Afterward, she took a phone call in the living room while he sat in his room, scrolling through messages. Some were kind. Others weren't. He read a few, then turned off his phone. Downstairs, his mother was speaking to a community leader who had reached out. "We want to invite you both to a local town meeting," the voice said through the phone. "People want to hear your perspective. It could really make a difference." She hesitated. "I'll think about it," she said. When she hung up, she leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. She didn't want her son to relive everything again. But she also knew that silence sometimes allowed wrong things to stay unchallenged. The next morning, she told him about the invitation. He shook his head immediately. "I don't want to talk about it in front of everyone." "I understand," she said softly. "You don't have to. I'll go alone if you'd rather not." He thought for a moment. "Will people listen?" "Maybe," she said. "Maybe not. But at least they'll hear the truth." He nodded slowly. "Okay, you can go." The night of the meeting, the community center was full. Parents, teachers, neighbors, even a few reporters showed up. The air was filled with quiet tension. Everyone wanted to know what she would say. When she took the microphone, she didn't read from notes. She just spoke. "My son was walking home from school," she began. "He wasn't breaking the law. He wasn't causing trouble. But he was treated like a suspect simply because someone thought he looked like one. That moment could have gone very differently. And that's what scares me." The room was silent. "I've worked in law enforcement for years," she continued. "I know what it means to wear the badge. I also know what it means to be seen as a threat when you've done nothing wrong. Those two truths should never exist together, but they do. And that's why we need to talk about it." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't blame anyone directly. She just spoke with quiet honesty, the kind that makes people stop and listen. When she finished, people stood and clapped. A few even wiped tears from their eyes. She thanked them and stepped down. Later, as she walked out, a local reporter approached her. "Do you think this will change anything?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Change doesn't start with speeches," she said. "It starts with how people treat each other when no one's watching." At home, her son was waiting on the couch pretending to watch TV. "How'd it go?" he asked. She smiled. "Better than I expected." He grinned. "I saw clips online. You were everywhere again." She rolled her eyes, laughing softly. "I guess that's not going away anytime soon." Over the next few weeks, life began to settle down again. The noise online faded slowly, replaced by new stories and new distractions. But the event had left its mark. People in the neighborhood looked at them differently, some with respect, some with quiet guilt. One afternoon, as the boy walked home again, a police car drove by. This time it didn't slow down. The officer inside gave a small nod and kept going. The boy nodded back, his heart steady. When he reached home, his mother was sitting on the porch sipping tea. "How was school?" she asked. "Better," he said. "Coach said they're organizing a talk about fairness and respect."
He said you inspired it. She smiled warmly.
"That's good." He sat beside her and took a deep breath. "You know," he said, "I used to think being brave meant not being scared. But that day I was terrified." She looked at him gently. "Bravery isn't the absence of fear," she said. "It's what you do while you're scared." He smiled faintly, looking out at the sunset. The street was quiet again, the same one where everything had gone wrong weeks ago, now peaceful as if nothing had ever happened. But he knew it wasn't the same. He wasn't the same. His mother reached over and put her hand on his shoulder. "Whatever happens next," she said softly, "don't let one bad moment change how you see yourself." He nodded, his voice quiet. "I won't." The sun dipped below the rooftops, and for the first time since that day, the silence around them felt peaceful again. Not heavy, not fearful, just calm. Some stories end with noise and anger, but this one, at least for now, ended with something better: understanding. The sound of the siren was gone now, replaced by the low hum of people whispering around. The two officers stood frozen, unsure what to do next. The woman who had stepped out of the black SUV still had her badge in her hand, and her calm stare made both of them uneasy. She didn't raise her voice, didn't move fast, but there was something in her tone that made it clear she wasn't someone to mess with. She walked closer to her son, who was still standing there with his hands halfway in the air. "Put your hands down, sweetheart," she said softly. Her voice trembled just a little, the way it does when someone is holding back a flood of emotions. He obeyed immediately, his eyes wide, still confused about how his mother suddenly appeared like that. The taller officer stepped back and cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we were just responding to a call." The suspect description. The woman cut him off, her voice firm but controlled. "Description of what? A teenager walking home with a gym bag?" The officer opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The crowd behind the yellow house fence was growing. Phones were raised higher now, catching every second of what was happening. The woman slowly put her badge away, looked at both officers, and then looked at her son. "Are you okay?" she asked him quietly. He nodded but didn't say anything. His throat felt dry, and he couldn't shake the feeling of fear that had built up in his chest. She turned back toward the officers. "What exactly did you think he did?" One of them tried again. "We got a call about a break-in a few blocks away." The description was, "Let me guess," she said, folding her arms. "Young, dark hoodie, black teenager." Neither of them spoke. The silence stretched for a few long seconds. She stepped closer, her tone calm but sharper now. "You didn't ask for ID before shouting at him. You didn't ask a question before putting your hand on your weapon. Do you know how many times this kind of thing goes wrong because someone doesn't stop to think?" The younger officer's shoulders dropped a little. "We didn't mean—" "You did," she interrupted quietly. "You meant to stop him. You meant to question him. But you didn't mean to see him as a person. That's the problem." Her words carried a weight that made even the people watching fall silent. The older officer looked embarrassed. He tried to explain again that they were only doing their job, but she didn't let him hide behind that. "Doing your job means protecting people," she said, "not scaring innocent kids on their way home." Someone in the crowd shouted, "Yeah, tell them," and a few others murmured in agreement. The tension in the air began to shift. The woman took a deep breath. "You two need to radio your supervisor," she said simply. The officers hesitated. "Ma'am, that's not necessary." "I think it is," she said, and then added with emphasis, "I'm a federal agent. You can check my credentials again if you'd like." That shut down any argument. The older officer pulled out his radio, avoiding eye contact. The younger one looked down at the ground, muttering something about a misunderstanding. Her son stood quietly, watching it all, still in disbelief. He had never seen his mother like this, calm, powerful, completely in control. A few people started to whisper her name, recognizing her from something they had seen online or maybe from a local news clip years ago. She didn't seem to notice. Her focus stayed only on her son and the two officers. When the supervisor finally arrived, the scene had turned into something that felt halfway between a standoff and a neighborhood meeting. The woman calmly explained what happened. The officer stood stiffly beside her, trying not to look embarrassed. The supervisor apologized immediately and promised to review the incident, but she didn't stop there. An apology doesn't fix what almost happened, she said quietly. You need to understand that this isn't just a training issue. This is about mindset. The supervisor nodded, agreeing quickly. We'll handle it, Agent, he said respectfully. The woman nodded, then turned to her son. Let's go home, she said softly. He hesitated. Are they going to get in trouble? She looked at the officers, then back at him. That's not our job to decide tonight, she said. But the truth always comes out one way or another. They walked to her SUV together. The crowd slowly began to scatter, some people still recording, others just shaking their heads. A few even clapped quietly as she passed. Inside the car, the silence felt heavy. The boy stared out the window, watching the flashing lights fade in the distance. His mother started the car but didn't drive right away. She looked at him for a long moment. You did everything right, she said gently. You stayed calm. You didn't argue. I'm proud of you. He didn't say anything at first, then whispered, I was so scared. I know, she said softly. So was I. She reached over and took his hand. For a moment, she wasn't the strong agent or the woman who had just silenced 2 cops with her words. She was just a mother who almost lost her son to a misunderstanding that never should have happened. They drove home slowly. The streets looked different now, quiet, almost too calm after what just happened. When they reached their house, the porch light was still on, like it had been waiting for them. Inside, he dropped his gym bag on the floor and sat on the couch without saying a word. His mother went to the kitchen, poured him a glass of water, and handed it to him. Drink, she said softly. He took a sip, still shaking a little. Mom, he finally said, what if you hadn't shown up? She looked at him for a long moment, the question cutting deep. Don't think about that, she said. You're safe now. But what if? He asked again quietly. She took a deep breath, sitting beside him. Then I'd be having a very different kind of conversation right now, she said honestly. But that's why I came home early tonight. Something told me I needed to check on you. He looked at her surprised. You weren't supposed to be here? She shook her head. No. I was supposed to be 2 states away on an assignment, but I couldn't shake this feeling that something was off. He didn't know what to say to that. For a few minutes, they just sat there in silence. The TV was off, the house quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Finally, his mother spoke again. You know, I deal with people like those officers all the time. Most of them mean well. But sometimes they forget that behind every face they stop, there's a story, a family, a life. He nodded slowly, thinking about the way the officers looked at him, like he was a problem, not a person. Do you think they'll change? He asked. I hope so, she said. But real change takes time. It starts with people like you, telling your story, not letting fear turn into anger. He thought about that for a while. I didn't do anything wrong, he said softly. You didn't, she agreed. And you don't ever need to prove that to anyone. Your worth isn't up for debate. Her words settled into his mind like a quiet truth. He leaned back against the couch, exhausted, but somehow calmer now. His mother reached over and pulled him close. And for a while they just stayed like that, no words. No explanations, just quiet relief. Later that night, after he went to bed, she sat at the kitchen table with her laptop. She opened a blank report form. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before she began typing. She didn't write it as a mother. She wrote it as a professional. Detailed, objective, every word carefully chosen. When she was done, she attached a short video clip from one of the bystanders who had already posted it online. She knew it would make waves, but she didn't care. Before shutting the laptop, she whispered to herself, they need to see what almost happened. Outside, the quiet neighborhood seemed peaceful again. But she knew peace only lasted when people stood up for what was right. Tonight she had done that, for her son and for every other kid who just wanted to make it home safely. And as she turned off the kitchen light and headed to her room, a small smile appeared on her face. She knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was the start of something bigger, something that might finally make a difference. The next morning started quietly. The sun was just rising, painting a soft gold light over the street outside. Birds were singing somewhere near the trees, but inside the house the mood was still heavy. The boy sat at the kitchen table stirring his cereal without really eating. His mother stood by the window, coffee in hand, staring out like she was watching the world think. Neither of them had slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flashing red and blue lights, the hands reaching toward their weapons, the cold feeling that maybe he wouldn't make it home. It was hard to shake that kind of memory. His mother finally turned away from the window. "You have school today," she said gently. He looked up. "Do I have to go?" She smiled faintly, but her eyes were tired. "You don't have to do anything. But sometimes moving forward is the best thing you can do." He thought about it. School meant facing his friends, who probably already knew what happened. The video had spread overnight. He had seen a few clips online before he turned his phone off. It already had thousands of views. Some people were angry, some were supportive, and some were saying things that hurt to read. He didn't know how to feel about any of it. His mother poured herself another cup of coffee. "People will talk," she said, as if reading his thoughts. "But what matters is what you know to be true. You didn't do anything wrong. You handled yourself with more strength than most grown men could have." He looked at her. "What are you going to do about the cops?" She took a deep breath. "I filed the report last night. It's being reviewed. There'll be meetings, investigations, statements. It won't be quick. Will they get fired?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But they'll be held accountable." "That's a start," he nodded, though he didn't look convinced. She reached over and touched his shoulder. "The goal isn't revenge," she said softly. "The goal is change." Later that morning, she drove him to school. The streets felt the same, but he noticed every patrol car that passed. He couldn't help it. Each one made his heart beat a little faster, even if they didn't look his way. His mother noticed but didn't say anything. She knew some fears take time to fade. When they reached the school, a few students were already gathered near the front gate. Some turned their heads when they saw him get out of the car. A few waved awkwardly. He forced a small smile, slung his bag over his shoulder, and walked inside. His best friend ran up to him almost immediately. "Man, I saw the video," he whispered. "That was crazy." "Are you okay?" He nodded. "Yeah, just tired." "Your mom's a legend," his friend said, shaking his head in disbelief. "She handled them like a boss." He smiled for the first time that day. "Yeah, she kinda did." Through the day, teachers were gentle with him. One of them pulled him aside and said she was proud of how calm he had been. Another said the school planned to host a discussion about safety and respect between police and youth. He wasn't sure if he wanted to be part of it yet, but he said he'd think about it. Meanwhile, his mother spent her day at her agency office downtown. She walked through the hallways like she always did, professional, composed, but her mind was elsewhere. She had meetings lined up, people to report to, but the memory of her son standing on that sidewalk wouldn't leave her alone. When she met with her superior, she laid everything out. The stop, the way the officers handled it, the lack of cause. She didn't speak with anger. She spoke with precision, with facts. Her voice didn't shake. Her superior listened carefully, then said, "You handled it the right way. I'll make sure it's pushed to the top of the review list." "Thank you," she said quietly. Before leaving, he added, "Off the record, what you did out there, that was powerful." The world saw it. "People need to see strength like that." She nodded. "It shouldn't take a badge to be respected," she replied. That night, she came home later than usual. Her son was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "You're trending," he said without looking up. She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" He turned the phone toward her. There was a headline on a news site. "Federal agent confronts police over mistaken teen stop. A mother's calm saves the day." She sighed. "I didn't want this to turn into a show. But maybe it's good," he said. "People are talking about it. Maybe it helps." She sat beside him. "Maybe," she said. "But I don't want you to just be a story people argue about online. You're a person. You're more than what happened yesterday." He looked at her and smiled faintly. "You always say that." "Because it's true," she said, smiling back. Over the next few days, the story kept growing. News channels called. Reporters showed up at their street, and activists wanted to meet her. She politely declined most interviews except one. It was a small community station that had supported local youth programs before.